When is a shoe not just a shoe? When it is a pair of very high, needle-thin heels worn by the First Lady of the United States on her way to the site of a natural disaster. Then it becomes a symbol for what many see as the disconnect between the Trump administration and reality, another example of the way in which this president and his family continue to define appropriate their own way, and an excuse for partisan name-calling. Or so became apparent Tuesday morning when President Trump and his wife left the White House to fly to Texas for a briefing on the devastation caused by Hurricane Harvey, and Mrs. Trump appeared on the lawn in black peg trousers, black shades, an olive green bomber jacket, and her stilettos, now a trademark. Very much the same kind of shoes, in other words, she has been wearing since long before she joined her husband on the campaign trail. Though by the time the plane had landed, Mrs. Trump looked altogether more grounded, in white sneakers and crisp white shirt, with a ponytail pulled through a black baseball cap emblazoned with the word FLOTUS. During her time in the air, the original shoes went from being mere footwear to objects of vilification thanks to social media's specific kind of alchemy. In response to the critical reaction, Stephanie Grisham, Mrs. Trump's communications director, emailed the following statement: "It's sad that we have an active and ongoing natural disaster in Texas, and people are worried about her shoes. That's a fair point, to a certain extent. Certainly there was a backlash to the backlash, with Chelsea Handler, for example, being attacked in turn for her tweet attacking Mrs. Trump's spikes. Not to mention some partisan crowing about the sneakers. But to dismiss all this as merely much ado about heels, or an example of the pettiness of our divided electorate, is to ignore the reality of the current conversation around the president, to pretend not to notice how sensitized everyone has become to his unpredictable reactions to major events, and to deny the power of the telling detail to invite applause, condemnation or misinterpretation. It is precisely the superficial nature of clothing, the fact that garments are immediately accessible to all, that makes them the go-to stand-in for more nuanced, complicated emotions and issues. Mrs. Trump's heels, after all, they appear to be classic Manolo Blahniks, are redolent of a certain cliched kind of femininity, decorative, impractical, expensive, elitist, all adjectives often associated with the brand Trump. That they also are part of the identity the First Lady brought to Washington, that her comfort level and ability to walk in exactly the kind of shoes that cause other women, wearing more solid shoes, to wince and crunch their toes in imaginary pain was part of her narrative and image from the start, does not obviate the fact that they have also come to represent her remove, for both good and ill. Women in the Capitol are generally more associated with sensible pumps than teetering patent leather numbers. This Mrs. Trump understands, which is why she changed into a more suitable costume, I use that word deliberately, for her arrival in Corpus Christi, Tex. The problem is that, as First Lady, in an environment as fraught as the current one, there is no such thing as offstage. Even boarding a plane becomes a quasi-official moment in which all messaging, spoken or assumed, is mined for meaning. Mrs. Trump clearly knows this to a certain extent and has accepted it as an exigency of her job. How else to interpret the Dolce & Gabbana black lace coat and veil she wore to visit the Pope on the president's first foreign tour, or the classic red Dior suit she chose for her arrival in France for Bastille Day? Or the fact that, while hosting Aki Abe, the First Lady of Japan, on Mrs. Abe's visit to Mar-a-Lago, she wore flat sandals for their tour of the Morikami Museum and Japanese gardens? When in Florida, the sharp point of the stilettos is that this kind of proactive analysis needs to be applied as consistently as possible across all public appearances, which, when you are in the White House, is all appearances. In Mrs. Trump's job, as in her husband's, details matter. Even shoes. Put your best foot forward, and all that.